All right, guys, the fun does not stop here. We just finished refactoring Domo full auth. We're going to move on to the next step of actually refactoring uh, a Domo entity into this framework that we're proposing in terms of having classes, splitting out or compartmentalizing our API requests and routes, and so on. So let's try to revisit what was the whole purpose of this config add users function or script. The point of this script was to take a data set that had a list of emails, display names, and editors or roles, and automatically add them to an instance of Domo, which on paper sounds really easy, but as it turns out, requires quite a few hits to a couple different APIs. And again, there was a tutorial video about the whole thing. But ultimately, what we need to start with is I need to be able to, sorry for scrolling around. What I need to be able to do is I need to say, hey, this user needs to be able to get assigned to this role. But which role ID is it? Especially if you have custom roles, you might have roles that don't have the same name as the system roles. But what ID is that? So the first function that we're going to take a look at is a function that allows us to get a list of all of the roles from Domo. So let's see. I think that's going to be this guy here, because here's my API request. I can see that I'm hitting v1 roles. Yep, this is the one. So, okay, you guys do the thinking for me. I'm hitting an API. So should that be in a library, sorry, a Domo class, or should that go into a root? I hope you immediately said, Jay, it should go into a root, because it should. So I'm going to make a new file. And let's see. I'm going to put this in the roles, in a root role file, because it has to do with interacting with roles. Yeah. So let's just see if we can't get this working. Let's ignore the data class for a second. Can I just get roles working? So let's see. I know that I need to import AIO HTTP. No, I don't. I don't. Because I'm actually going to handle all of this in get data. So let's see. What should my function be? I should say await get data and then do the thing. And I'll store this into response. Pass it a URL. Uh-oh. Headers. We haven't talked about headers before. We'll talk about headers in a second. I don't need to await the conversion to JSON because my getData function handles that. And remember, the whole reason we did this is so that we don't have to worry about sessions, so I don't have to worry about that. Okay. Headers. How am I going to handle headers? Well, the whole idea is I don't want to handle passing authentication into every get data method, right? Or every method that I write. So I wonder if there's a way where I can clean this up a little. I wonder if there's a way where I can just pass in the full auth object into get data. And we're going to iterate on this, so let's be patient here. So here I am. I'm in get data. I'm going to pass in my authentication. Now, I kind of want to be able to write Domo full auth, like as the type to expect, but I'm going to hold off on that for now, and it'll make sense why in a minute. But I will say that the default is none, because in the previous tutorial, we used get data to get a session token so that I could generate a full auth object. So I won't always have one. But I need to code around what if I do or what if I don't. Now, we know if I want to hit this API, I have to authenticate and I have to pass in that token. So you might say, okay, well, to handle authentication in get data, I just need to pass in a header into the session request. And so I might start with something like headers by default is equal to none, but if you pass in full auth, then generate the header or replace the header with this XDOMO authentication. Now this kind of works, but I don't like it. The reason why I don't like it is because that means if I ever try to build an alternative authentication method, like what if we were working with developer authentication? Remember, developer authentication, I can't remember the exact way the token is structured, but it might be called X developer auth. I don't know. It might, it has a different authentication method, so it'll pass a different header into my request. And what if I want to use Trello or authenticate against Slack or Jira or any of the other tools I might want to build integrations with? I want get data, the function, to be flexible, and I don't want to be tied to the database or the APIs that I'm calling. I don't want to have to alter the get data function every time. So is there a way where I can shift the responsibility of defining the token to the auth object? And of course the answer is yes. So let's pop over into the Domo auth and let's make the responsibility of setting the token the responsibility of the class itself. Now I already have added the code or the line. The token is going to be a type string. It will not be printed, so repr is equal to false, and the default value is none. Okay, I've already added that. Now, where should I set the token? Header, rather. Ooh, sorry, I'm talking garbage. Header is a string. Sorry, header is a dictionary. And it will be repr equals false, default equals none. There we go. Okay, I'm going to create a new method. It's not asynchronous. I'm going to create a new method called setToken. It will receive itself, and all I have to do is say self.headers is equal to XOM authentication, header singular, self.token. Yeah. And here under getAuthToken, if I successfully receive a token, then I will call self.setToken. Now you might be wondering, Jay, why are you creating a separate method for setting the token? Why don't you just do this? Well, again, guys, our goal when we try to write code, I mean, there's this balance between complicated and not, but we want to separate responsibilities. The responsibility, the getAuthToken function, that function's job or method's job is to get the token. Maybe I will also call a function that a method that says setHeader. Wow. Maybe I will call a method setHeader, but I don't want to define what it means to be a header in getToken. That should be defined in the setHeader method. And that's why we separate them. You'll notice I also have an underscore. Um, the underscore is just nomenclature. Typically, that means that it's a internal only function. It should only be accessed by the class, and we as end users don't call it. But when somebody calls getAuth token, we will also call setHeader. Let's rerun our code here and just see if it works. I'm going to come back up to the top. I just want to confirm that setting the header works up here. And it looks like I have an error. Huh, fantastic. Invalid syntax. Really? Why? Line 26. 26 is right here. Ooh, that's weird indentation. What's going on? Oh, missing close prints. Let's try that again, guys. Oh, all sorts of extra letters creeping in. Okay. Let's clean up get data now. So get data. Um, now that I have a method that will allow me to set the header, I can delete. Yeah, I can delete. You know what? I'm not going to call it auth, full auth. I'm going to call it auth class. The reason why I'm going to call it auth class is because, again, you know, the the responsibility of setting the header is defined in the auth class. And so I don't need this if statement for full auth or dev auth or Slack auth or Trello auth. I can just have one method, or sorry, one if statement that says if there's a auth class, then the header is equal to auth class.token. That's all I need. If I pass in an auth class, then the header should be equal to auth class.token. That's kind of all I want, but I just want to make sure that my original code still works. So let me refresh this real quick. Cool. Token received. Let's also confirm that there is a header. So full auth dot header. Rinse. Awesome. And I guess let's make sure that now we can get roles, which is where we started our whole story. We defined get data. Get data now receives auth class, which will pass as the full auth object. Okay, na. It will receive a response and return a response. Let's just test that for now, and then I'll do a commit. So we'll say import library dot roots dot root role as root role, and we're going to call root role dot get roles. We need to pass in the full auth object. And already throwing errors. What do you got for me? Domo full auth is not defined. Right. So we need to import library domo full auth as DMDA, DMDA dot. I also need to import get data. Import library dot roots dot get data. We're going to abbreviate that as GD. So GD dot and import lib dot reload root role. Is that how you type that? Yes, but what I do, I forgot the as. Root role, import DMDA. Did I not press save? I did not. Cool. No! Errors. I think it didn't like my headers. So, oh, token. Here, aha, success. We got our roles. Okay, let me stop this tutorial before it gets too long. So what did we look at? We looked at extending the full auth class to get or set the headers, right? And one of the things we discussed when we were looking at get data is, so we wanted this to be flexible. We wanted get data to work with any kind of authentication, any sort of API system. So instead of saying, okay, hard code what the header definition is here, we moved that responsibility up to Domo auth. As we were going ahead and trying to define our get roles function, right? All we had to do then was just say, hey, leverage get data, call the get function, hit this URL, pass in full auth as the authentication class, and we are done. Well, done with this piece, which is actually just the start. So let's go ahead and commit. Where's my terminal? New terminal. So where am I? I need to go cd library, git commit, git add, git commit. And what did we do? We extended get data to accept authentication class, and we extended Domo auth to set a header. Git push. Sweet. Cool. We have our role root. Let's go ahead and create the class. So we're going to create a new file, Domo. Let's call it instance config. The reason why I'm going to call it instance config is because it's pulling in the configuration of the instance. We're going to use it to get a list of all of the roles. I don't really care about the instance all that much yet. I think I started this already. Where did we start it? Here. Here is our data class for instance config. I'm going to copy all of it. Ooh, that's a lot. I'm not going to deal with anything that has to do with users, so I'm going to delete the users stuff. I have get roles. Okay, so this get roles function we implemented over in the root role. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that. And Instance config is a data class, so let me import data class. Sorry, from data class says import data class. Let me also make sure to import dmda.demo full auth. So let's say import library.domo auth as dmda. I need to import get roles from the root role dot. Yep. So import library dot roots dot root role as root role. Good. Anything else? Okay. Here it's saying return a Domo role class, which we haven't defined. So for now, I'm just going to comment that out. Let's see if we can't just make this base class kind of work as it is. So coming back up to the code I'm replacing here, import library.domo instance config, and what are we going to call? Ghostbusters. DM DIC. I'm thinking this is going to be misspelled, so let me just go back before I annoy myself. Aha, Domo instance config. Let me comment that line out. Get roles. Maybe that'll work. Equals. Didn't print. I need to await. Now we have errors. Get roles was never awaited. Did I not await it in instance config? Get roles. Oh, I also don't have a return. Instance config.getRoles was never awaited. That's a lie. I'm looking at it right there. Aha. Weird. Okay. So we added the instance config object. I'm not going to commit yet. Let's kind of wrap this up with a bow. So right now I'm returning the response get data class. The only thing I want to return is actually the contents of the response, right? And again, coming back to separating the responsibilities. I created response get data to know that I'm getting a successful 200 response. I want to simplify this test. So here I'm saying if I don't get something back, then I return a false or something, right? Let's create an error. Class. Invalid role retrieval error is based off of the error. Ooh, exception. Sorry, it's based off of the exception class. And we're not going to do anything, so we'll just pass. But we're going to raise an error if we need to. So how do I know if it's bad? So this is just going to be the response. So let's say if response dot is valid. So if it's not valid, then we're going to raise the error. Otherwise, we assume that it is valid. So what do I want to do if it is valid? Let's create an object called role ls, which is equal to res.response. And I think I've got some sort of a syntax error someplace, maybe. Let's see if this works, though. Response get data does not have an attribute is valid. Is success? Let's call this success. Okay, now we try. Aha. Now I've just returned my list of roles. This is exciting. So actually, let me go ahead and commit. So we'll say git add, git commit. What did we do? We added Domo instance config class. And what I'm pretty excited that we added, though, was we added a little bit of error handling based off of the response get data statuses. That's pretty clever. I'm pretty stoked about that. And if we wanted to, we could wrap this in some sort of a try catch, which arguably we should. So let's say try and accept invalid role retrieval as E, and we'll say print error retrieving roles. And let me grab my little emoji. Is that how you raise an error? Looks like. Okay. Cool. So git commit. Oh, I didn't push. That's okay. Nice. Nice. Very exciting. Now, one of the guidelines that I have is where possible, we want to return a class. I don't usually want to return a JSON string or a dictionary. Like, there's no reason to do that because it's not useful. This represents a role, so I should have a class for my roles. Let me go ahead and create a new file called domo role.py. And honestly, this to me is where this library concept really comes together. So again, thank you for sticking with me this far. Somewhere in here, I define a role. We're just going to take the short version of it. We're not going to worry about the method and all of that just yet. Okay. When I look at this, what is this? I don't want you. Go away. When I look at this response here, what is a role? A role consists of an ID, a name, a description, authority count, user count, created and modified. Okay, those are the fields that a role can have. But what do I really care about? I care about the ID, the name, and I guess the description. So as I define a role actually lies, the only thing I care about are the auth parameter, the ID, and the name. I'm going to extend it to add, well, let me leave it as is. We'll add description later just so you can see what that looks like when you do it by hand. Cool. So I have a Domo role. Now, You might be wondering, well, Jay, how do I get this to be a role? Well, that's what this bit of code was here was all about. It says, hey, um, this is a form of list comprehension. So for each role object in the role list, create Domo role, like an instance of the Domo role class, pass in a full auth, the ID, and the name. Man, I don't like that. I'm going to do this a different way. This will work. Okay, fine. This will work, so let's just make sure it works. Let me save this. Oh, in order for this to work, I first need to import the Domo role. So import library.domo role as dmdr. Okay. Is there anything else? I think that's it. Oh, here I need to import Domo auth. End of field. Where? Line 30, Domo instance config. Oh, yeah, close prints. Field is not defined in Domo role. Um, man, come on. Here's roles. Oh, plural. Okay, so we called get roles. And get roles is now, instead of returning that JavaScript or dictionary list of dictionaries, it's now returning a list of Domo roles. Now, the nice thing about it is that now it's a little bit cleaner looking, but I only keep the fields ID and name because that's what I defined as properties of or attributes of the Domo role class, and that's all that I'm passing here into the Domo role class. Repr equals false. Which is okay. But you know what? I actually don't like this way of creating a Domo role. I'm going to show you guys a kind of cleaner way of doing it so you don't have to write this long verbose code inside of get roles. What I'm going to do is inside of Domo role, I'm going to write a function, a class method called from JSON. From JSON will receive an object as well as the class. So just in case we didn't know, or maybe I didn't mention, a class method, again, is my way of having a function that returns an instance of the class. I think it's more accurate to say the class method is accessible by the class as opposed to the instance of the class. And that differentiation might not make sense, but Domo full auth is the class itself. Full auth is an instance of Domo full auth. Full auth has my username, my password, my stuff attached to it, whereas Domo full auth is just the class itself. And so when I create a class method called from JSON doesn't know anything about an admin role or the default role or the participant role. From JSON can only interact with the class. And so what we'll do is, and apologies if that definition doesn't really make sense, but what I'll say is I'm going to create a function called from JSON that will take the class that was passed into it and return I'm going to say full auth equals none. We're going to make it optional to pass in full auth. But I can also pass in some more properties. And that will be the end of defining this class. And I'll return DMC. Okay. I believe now I can come into Domo instance and I can say, hey, dot from JSON, pass in object equals role object and full auth equals full auth. So nice. Get roles works. It is returning the ID, the admin, as well as the description. Okay. So what did we learn how to do? We learned how to use a method, in this case, the class method called getRoles, to query this API, getRoles API, which returned a list of, let me just print it here so we can see it. We hit the API and the response included a list of all of the roles. But this is marginally useful because this is just a string, or it's an object note representation of a role. And we said, hey, I can one up that. Instead of just returning the response string, I can convert that into a Domo role using a from JSON class method, which is what we did here. So we said, hey, take this string representation of a role and turn it into the Domo role class method by storing these string parameters into the object attributes. And that's how we end up with this representation down here, or the response from get roles. Save. Sorry. Cool. Let's go ahead and commit that. Okay. So home stretch. If I go to the Domo role, right, it's nice to have the the name and the ID and all of that stuff. But where it really gets interesting is if I can tell a role, hey, add a user to this role. And this is going to be the last function method that we work on, and then we'll call it good for this series. So at the end of the day, what I want to be able to do is I want to be able to provide a list of user IDs to a role and say, hey, add these users to this role. That's where we want to end up. So we'll start at the method or the API request. So I need to make a new, nope, here's roots role. Okay. What are we doing in here? We're saying, hey, I'm going to call this add users to role. We're going to pass in the auth object, the role ID, and the list of users in a string. I really like this type hinting, if you will, that tells me what I should be passing in. I think it's pretty helpful to see. Cool. I don't have to do a try catch. I know it's going to be successful. I'm reasonably sure it's going to be successful. So we're just going to say response is equal to, again, we're not doing session.request. We have our getData function, our getData method, function, it's a function J. This time we're going to send a put request. We're going to hit this URL. Oh man, this is ugly. Come on. What are we doing? Oh, it's just because of the zoom. Okay, fine. I don't have to define headers because remember we passed the authentication class to the getData function, so I don't need to do that. But I do need to pass authentication class is equal to full auth. And then for the body, we're going to pass the user list. I think that's going to work, but I'm worried that it won't. See you in a sec. I wish we had a linter that could help me with formatting. Okay, now, this API does not return any content. So if it's a 204, we were successful, but it won't have any kind of description or text or anything. I'm going to move that logic into the implementation of my add users to role function in Domo role. So in Domo role, I'm going to move add users. Okay. So notice this is not a class method. What that means is I already have to have the role. I have to know that I'm role 15 and I want to add users to myself to role 15. So what are the arguments of add users? I receive a list of users. I have to receive a Domo full auth. Well, I can receive a Domo full auth. And you might be thinking, well, Jay, how are you going to be able to hit add users to role without is it called root role? What is it called? Yeah. How are you going to add users to role if full auth is an optional parameter? Remember, full auth has the self, right? We're part of the Domo role class, and it is possible to save the full auth object as an attribute of self. So here I can say full auth is equal to full auth if you passed it, or self.full auth. And we might make the argument, let's say in Domo auth, I know I always need to have an auth object. So let me do class no full auth error. And then when I create my, when somebody tries to call the add users function, if there is not a full auth, so if its value is none, then we are going to raise no full auth error. But hopefully people will always pass authentication. Okay. All right. So what do we want to do? We want to call add users to role. It is in the root role module. We need to pass in full auth, which we just defined. And it's going to receive role ID is equal to self.id. And user list is equal to user list. Nice. Here's where I'm going to do my test. Because remember, the add user response is just that get data response object. And so then I need to do my test. If the status is equal to 204, return true. Otherwise, return false. Ooh, that's a lot. That's a lot. That is a lot. So I'm sure you guys want to see the code run, but I think this tutorial has gone on long enough. What I wanted to really highlight to you guys is this method of compartmentalizing our code, as well as kind of talk through some of the decisions that I'm making as I'm writing this code. One of my coworkers said, Jay, this is kind of the tree. You define the tree and the branches, the rules for how it should work, the tools that I need to get started, and then I can add leaves. I can add a method, add user. I can add a new class for the Domo dataset. But I'm going to try to follow this structure that we've created. And so what is that structure that we just looked at? Well, in the context of Domo role, we said we're going to create a class called Domo role. We always authenticate using Domo full auth, but if you want to use developer.domo.com APIs, you can add another authentication method. We are using the data class module because we can add attributes to, we're using the data class library because we can add these attributes to the class pretty easily. And we are taking advantage of class methods. We're taking advantage of class methods to, in this case, return an instance of the Domo role class if I'm instantiating a class from a JSON. And this is a pattern that I use a lot if I'm pulling data out of the APIs. In Domo instance config, where we were getting a list of roles, right? That's where it really came to life. We had the opportunity to either return the JSON string of just like a list of text, or I had the choice of converting it into a Domo role using that from JSON class method. Where possible, I really like using this from JSON approach. It just makes it so much easier and makes my code a lot more condensed and moves the responsibility of defining the code into the class where it actually happens. So we were taking a look at using class methods. When it came to running methods that actually interact with the APIs, like um, adding a user to a role, we started by saying, hey, let's split up the API request from how my implementation, how my library does the thing. So we looked at creating a library of routes or root files, and I'll have one for each entity. And within it, I might say, okay, here is my get roles function, and here is my add users to role function. And the reason why we really like that is because someday Domo might say, hey, we're going to give you a v2 API that goes someplace else entirely. And all I have to do then is just call this v2 and then just change that one, make that very small change inside of my implementation. What I also like about that is as long as I'm always returning the response get data class, I have a very easy way of testing, is my response valid? And then I can very quickly add the exception handling. I think that's everything. So I'll go ahead and stop the video. We'll get this into GitHub, put it online. If you guys want to engage with this, if you want to add content or whatever, please try to follow the rules. And I'll go through your pull requests and all of that. Pull, push, pull, merge, whatever. We'll do the thing. It'll be fun. My name's Jay Wilson. I'll catch you guys later.